It's a good thing my mother-in-law ignored him and went to their newborn son, otherwise he might have died. What's your worst story from the throw him in the pool, he'll learn how to swim parenting style? I had never gone camping before I was 11. I really wanted to go with my 10-year-old cousin. My parents took me to the woods and handed us the tent and a half-full bag of ranch Doritos, and like a pack of bratwursts, and my 7-year-old sister. Then they pulled off, leaving us to camp for the first time alone in the woods with a 7-year-old. Not a fun weekend. I never went camping again, but it was apparently fine because that's how my dad and uncle learned. I'm just grateful for the lack of serial killers and black bears. My dad was notorious for the rub dirt on it method when I got hurt as a kid. When I was 9 I was in a nasty motorcycle accident out in the desert. I broke and misplaced my fibula, the bone was protruding from my leg. My dad didn't want to end his desert trip early, so he told me not to look at it and to keep trying to walk. I was in so much pain anytime I would move I would black out. My brother was so concerned he urged my dad that we should go home. My dad finally gave in but was so drunk he let my 11-year-old brother at the time drive us out of the desert. He was so nervous he hit so many bumps and each bump I would black out then come to. Once we got home he thought it would be best to sleep it off before going to the hospital. The next day I was admitted to the hospital and my dad was taken into custody by CPS. My younger cousin, 4 at the time, was a climber and always needed help getting down. His dad told his mom to leave him. He'll either learn how to get down himself or stop climbing. Cousin ended up climbing onto the roof, fell off and got impaled on a fence pole. One very expensive trip to the and he now has a cool scar on his thigh. Edit, he did not stop climbing, he just got better ways to get off the roof. Not a parental neglect story, but that reminds me of being 6 and jumping off our 2-story house. My family was roofers, and they were fixing the roof. My uncle was walking around the driveway and I decided it would be fun to yell, "Catch me!" as I leaped. He did indeed catch me. My parents about had heart attacks. Hurt my arm playing football during morning break at school, was sent home by the school nurse. My dad said it was fine. Bandaged it and sent me to school the next day only for them to send me home again within an hour. My mom made my dad take me to hospital and my arm was broken. My wrist had split lengthways, it was in casts for 9 months. I was secretly buzzing to be honest because, well, that showed him the knob. Edit, wow. Appreciate the upvotes and awards guys and gals. My father did the same thing. I broke my left arm on the trampoline when I was like 5 and I came in the house crying and he told me I was being dramatic and didn't take me to the hospital until the next day. I was volunteering at a parent-child zoo day and saw a few parents like this. The zoo had some free-roaming peacocks, and it was awful how many parents just didn't tell their too young to know kids that they can be mean. So, the little toddler goes, "Wow, pretty bird," and tries to get a closer look, only to get chased and attacked by this thing while the parents watch. Most of them said something like, "You should have known better," like, "How if you never teach them? The child can barely walk, you expect them to remember that some animals have a strong territorial sense? And then your baby gets terrorized by this thing that's bigger than them and looks like an alien for all they know, and you don't even give them a hug?" See also, that one mom we had to kick out of the zoo because she was encouraging her kids to antagonize the llama in the hopes it would spit on them. Yikes, people, have some empathy for tiny humans who trust you implicitly with their well-being. My father-in-law decided when his first child was born that he and his wife, would not go to the baby when he started crying in the middle of the night, in order to teach him that crying doesn't get you anything in this world. Turns out, newborns need to be fed every 2 hours. So, it's a good thing my mother-in-law ignored him and went to their newborn son, otherwise he might have died. When I was about 5 or 6, I was very sick with the flu. Fever, vomiting, sweating, congestion, it was awful. There was some mix-up at the pharmacy, and they thought I was my father and gave him adult medication, basically these giant horse pills. Now, normal child medication for things like this are syrups and chewable SHT for obvious reasons. My dad comes home and tells me I have to take these meds. I have a hard time getting them down, almost choking a few times. My dad got frustrated and literally started shoving these huge pills down my sore throat with his angrily shaking fingers. I started crying, my nose was stuffed so I could only breathe through my mouth. I remember my dad's wedding ring banging against my teeth, eyes watering, gasping for air while looking at my mom for help. Eventually I coughed it back up, crying and throat on fire. I remember my mom demanding an apology from my dad, who just said, well, he's going to have to learn to take pills like this sometime anyway, and stormed off. Damn. I haven't thought about that story in 20 plus years. Holy CRP, I have a really similar experience to that. I started getting migraines back when I was around 11-12, and I got a really bad one while I was up at my parents' vacation house with a friend. We were watching a movie, and it started to hurt pretty badly. I wanted to get some kind of chewable pain reliever, because of my fear of choking. My dad pulled out a bottle of these massive tablets of aspirin and says I can take these or suffer through the headache. I tried to swallow them with water, but I literally couldn't and spat them out. Growing increasingly angry, my dad finally grabbed a marshmallow from our pantry, waved it in front of my face before he stuffed the 2 tablets in them. He then grabbed me by the head like it was a baseball and forced my jaw open and stuffed the marshmallow tablet lump down my throat and forcing me to swallow. It hurt so bad and I was terrified I'd choke to death. I started to cry and then he screamed at me to shut up. My friend saw the whole thing and wouldn't look at my dad for the rest of the trip. Your comment brought that memory back, and damn. Our parents are screwed up. My dad and I once witnessed someone who literally did this for a little 3-year-old girl. This little girl was just playing at the edge of the pool, happily minding her own business when her dad ran up behind her, picked her up and tossed her screaming as far as he could into the deep end of the pool while yelling, "Time to swim, honey." At first my dad and I didn't react, cause my dad has done this to me as a game. I learned to swim first, but we started to notice that she was struggling to surface while her dad just watched. My dad nervously asked, "Can she swim?" To which the guy just shrugs and says, "She'll figure it out." I have never seen my dad book it so fast to get at the water as I did that day. He quickly got the kid out of the water and started screaming at the guy about what kind of idiot he was while the girl was just bawling her eyes out. I swear my dad was ready to deck the guy. This was back in the 1990s, so we didn't have a cell phone to call the police, but we never saw them again after. It was the first time in my life I had seen insane parenting, and to this day freaks me out that some people will still do this. I was always a picky eater growing up. One time my mom sat me down with a small bowl of almonds and told me I couldn't get up out of my seat until I finished it. I insisted that I hated them, and they were making my mouth itch. She thought I was just being difficult. I just started to swallow the almonds like pills because my mouth was so itchy from chewing on them. A couple years later I saw an allergist and discovered I was allergic to tree nuts. My mom did this to me with a peanut butter sandwich. You can't leave till you eat it. One bite and I ended up in the hospital. I actually used to be a swim teacher in college, teaching private lessons in people's backyards because of parents who had thrown their kids into the pool to sink or swim. It was usually moms calling me for help because they heard from a friend of a friend that I was able to teach their kid and get them to like the water again in about a month or less. One kid, he was 7, I had to sit with him on the pool deck the whole first lesson and bring buckets of water to him. His dad had dunked him multiple times and insisted that his son would just figure it out eventually because that's how he'll earn. Needless to say, he was never home when I was there. The mom had me come while dad was at work. 4 weeks later she had me come later in the afternoon so he would come home towards the end of the lesson. His dad saw his son swimming and cried happy tears. He had no idea I had been there 3 days a week for a month. My favorite student was a 70-year-old man who wanted to do a triathlon but never learned to swim because his dad threw him in as a child. It took about 3 months total, a lot of hand-holding on the steps and shallow end, but he finally achieved his goal and I got to cheer him on at the finish line. I still remember how each of my students clung to my arms and clawed at my neck in their first lessons. I never dunked or forced anyone out of their comfort zone. My lessons had to be customized for each student to keep it fun and relaxing. The trauma in their eyes was haunting though. It stayed with me and I never force anything on my kids that they aren't ready to do. It's about trust, not force. I wish every swim instructor was like how you were. I always had a fear of water and pools, so my parents signed me up for private lessons so I could learn. I think I was like 10 at the time. The first lesson the teacher I was supposed to learn from couldn't be there, so she had a colleague fill in. He had been told I was afraid and instead of easing me into it, he started dumping buckets of water on my head when I refused to go deeper than chest deep. I think somehow my lack of movement due to fear annoyed this guy or something. I don't know why else a grown man would aggressively dump water on a kid while she cried. Pretty sure he was laughing at me for being upset too. In the end, after many lessons, I learned to swim a few strokes down a pool but not tread water. So, I might still drown one day, I guess. Thank you for watching the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more quality content. Leave a comment if you have any suggestions. Goodbye.